My name is Kehkasha. I am a United Nations Human Rights Champion, winner of the 2016 International Children's Peace Prize, and founder president of Global Social Innovation Enterprise Green Hope Foundation. My work focuses on ensuring children's rights because every single global problem that needs to be solved affects children disproportionately because of their increased vulnerability. Therefore, if we are to solve our world's most pressing challenges, we have to consider the unique challenges that children face and make sure that they have their rights and freedoms taken into account at all levels, whether that is providing them with equal access to education, whether that is ensuring that they have safe spaces, or whether that is just listening to their voices. We must bring children's voices to the table and make sure that their rights and freedoms are protected everywhere.
At the OECD, we believe that access to justice needs to be at the root of our efforts to address inequalities. As part of the Inclusive Growth Initiative and Child Well-Being Agenda, we look at child well-being as a cross-cutting issue that covers children's home and family environment, their health and safety, their education and school life, and their access to justice. Let me share 3 key considerations for our collective efforts to make progress on access to justice for children. First, a whole-of-state approach to access to justice is needed to break down silos and embed horizontal coordination and integration into policy design and implementation. Second, we need to invest in data and evidence to measure and monitor progress in improving children's access to justice. At the OECD, we are taking steps to adjust the methodology of our legal needs survey to improve our understanding of the unique legal needs and accessibility of justice from a child's perspective. Third and final, there's a strong need to encourage in regular dialogue and collect good practice on what works in the design and delivery of people-centered services. In this context, the forthcoming OECD framework for child-friendly justice aims to provide governments with guidance and tools to pursue child-centered justice reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, I commend the Global Initiative on Justice with Children for stepping up the global commitment to ensure access to justice for all children. The OECD stands ready to support countries in their efforts by mobilizing our networks and expertise to promote dialogue, collect data, and support the case for a child-friendly justice system.
El derecho del niño a ser escuchado establecido en el artículo 12 de la Convención de los Derechos del Niño nos impone el deber de promover sistemas de justicia, es decir, modos de hacer la justicia que faciliten esa participación, garantizando la oportunidad de esa escucha en todo procedimiento judicial o administrativo que afecte a un niño. Esto implica que los servicios de justicia deben adaptarse a los niños, niñas y adolescentes para ser realmente accesibles, particularmente en delitos de especial gravedad como los delitos sexuales contra los niños. Tenemos que extremar los cuidados de esa comunicación, contemplando especialmente los efectos que esta declaración puede suponer en sus vidas. Por lo tanto, debemos poner a los niños, niñas y adolescentes realmente en el centro de los diseños institucionales al momento de determinar las medidas adecuadas para tomar esa declaración testimonial. En la Ciudad de Buenos Aires, en el Ministerio Público Tutelar, que es un organismo que tiene como función promover el acceso a la justicia de niños, niñas y adolescentes, se puso en funcionamiento una sala de entrevista especializada que cuenta con unos perros especialmente entrenados para acompañar emocionalmente a niños, niñas y adolescentes que tienen que prestar declaración. Llegó así una niña de 4 años a hacer una pericia diagnóstica individual, ¿no? Y en la hora de los juegos, la niña se quebró y rompió en llanto porque no podía contar. En ese momento le dijeron que el perro que la acompañaba, con la que se encontraba jugando, le gustaba mucho escuchar lo que los niños le venían a decir. Entonces, de manera espontánea, le levantó la oreja a ese perro y le contó todo lo que le había pasado. Después de eso se acercó a su mamá y le dijo, muy contenta, mamá, pude contar. Cuando el sistema logra quebrar ese pacto de silencio y los muros que el perpetrador ha construido alrededor del niño se caen frente a nuestros ojos, la justicia adquiere su sentido y transforma ese difícil tránsito que es esa declaración para los niños, niñas y adolescentes en una experiencia liberadora y restaurativa. Construyamos una justicia que genere singularidad para los niños y adolescentes, esa singularidad que en tanto necesitan para poder afrontar estos procesos.
Today, about 1 in 5 young people is not receiving any kind of basic education, employment, or training. As a result, many are facing exclusion, marginalization, and are locked out of opportunities, which in turn contributes to mistrust and diminished horizons. And all of this leads to participation and opportunity gaps and deepening frustration and anxiety. Making matters worse, rather than creating incentives and support systems to help, we're seeing some governments characterizing young people as threats. This is expressed most obviously in aggressive policing operations, the lowering of the age of criminal responsibility, mass incarceration, and the placement of young people in adult prisons. There's very little evidence these kinds of tactics achieve their intended outcomes, and ample research suggesting that they actually exacerbate crime, violence, and victimization. The truth, of course, is that the vast majority of young people around the world are not inclined towards violence. To the contrary, young people are extraordinarily resilient and wellsprings of innovation, ideas, and solutions. Around the world, young people are on the front line of peace processes and peace building, criminal justice and penal reform, democratic renewal and revitalization and climate action, and they're connected like never before. So despite the tremendous challenges ahead, young people are surprisingly optimistic. They're actually hopeful about the future. Surveys conducted by the UN in 2020 suggested about a third of all youth believe that life will actually get better by 2050 compared to today. Roughly 9 in 10 see the current moment as an opportunity rather than a threat. Harnessing this positive energy and leveraging it for the future is key. This means first and foremost investing in quality education and opportunity of outcomes. These issues have become urgent, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, with over 90% of young people having had their education disrupted in some kind of way. Even before COVID-19, roughly 260 million children and young people, they weren't even receiving the most rudimentary of educational skills. What's required is a concerted effort to bridge this gap, including in relation to financing. The next priority is decent and sustainable employment. Young people are too often sidetracked into the informal sector with low-paying jobs and insecure jobs. Reskilling and upskilling youth is critical, as are strategies to ensure engagement in low-emission, climate-friendly labor markets. Youth labor guarantees are critical, as is a commitment to intergenerational equity. Look, we're facing extraordinarily complex, interconnected, and accelerating challenges on our horizon globally. Young people are going to have to deal with these. They need to be equipped with the skills and discretion to address them. This begins with ensuring safety and security, but requires a multidimensional engagement that builds resilience for the long term.
When children are confronted with the justice system, they have to be considered as children first and foremost. They can be suspect or accused in criminal proceeding. They can be victims or witnesses of a crime. They can be going through an administrative justice procedure, such as an asylum procedure, or their parents can be in conflict with the law. No matter the reason, each child needs to feel secure, respected, and needs to have trust in justice. Each child has the right to be heard, and professionals working in the justice system must be trained to interact with children. Procedures must be adapted to the children's age and needs. Children have the right to understand their rights and the mechanism and outcomes of judicial procedures. While some progress has been made in the European Union towards building more child-friendly justice system, we need to continue working together to ensure that every child, irrespective of its age, gender, sexual orientation, migratory status, or health conditions, has a positive and rights-based contact with justice. The EU strategy on the rights of the child, adopted by the European Commission last March, identifies child-friendly justice as one of the 6 thematic priorities for our work in the years to come. and the EU Strategy on Victims' Rights, adopted in 2020, stresses the importance of specialized, targeted, and integrated support for child victims, including child houses such as the Scandinavian model of Barnehus. They have been conceived to provide support to victims or witnesses of child sexual abuse. The Commission has supported the expansion of Barnehus across the European Union through funding. Currently, 24 EU member states have in place or are piloting such projects.
Access to justice is a fundamental human right. It is an enabling right that empowers children to realize the rights enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The right to access to justice, however, still seems for many disconnected from the realities faced by children. Quoting UNICEF, tens of thousands of children daily in the world continue to have their rights violated. Only a fraction of children and families in the world have access to a fair, timely, and effective redress due to obstacles in accessing justice. We as adults have the responsibility to ensure that children can understand and most essentially can trust the legal systems that should protect and safeguard their rights and their well-being. We must admit that justice systems worldwide are failing to protect children. Children must feel confident that the justice system will not fail them. This is even more special in the case for vulnerable children, such as children with disabilities, migrant children, and children in jails, detention centers, and other places that deprive them of their freedom. I must appeal to each and every one of us to be guided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Justice systems are not simply an issue of the courts of law. The provision of credible and effective assistance to children needs also to be a priority. The training of professionals in the justice system is crucial. The professionals that interact with children, including the police, the child protection services, and psychosocial professionals, is also a priority to ensure that children are effectively heard in the justice process. I would like to reaffirm that access to justice is a fundamental human right in itself. Access to justice for children can no longer be a dream. It should be a global goal that must be effectively achieved for all children today.
The promotion and protection of children's rights is important to Switzerland as a state party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child and all its optional protocols. Switzerland is fully committed to the rights of the child and, more generally, to the UN treaty body system. Switzerland has also supported the Congress since its inception. It co-organized the second edition of the Congress in Geneva in 2015. The focus of this year's edition on access to justice for all children is of critical significance. It is positive to see progress achieved globally to uphold children's rights in line of international standards. But the equal access to justice for all children is still not ensured everywhere. Many children across the world still face discrimination on various grounds. This is true even in countries with relatively robust child justice systems and child-friendly procedures. And this is problematic not only because it undermines the basic principle of equality, but also because it exposes children to a vicious cycle of exclusion. For this reason, Switzerland encourages participants to share their concerns, experiences, and best practices, and to come up with recommendations that could help reduce and ultimately eliminate discrimination on any grounds for every child in the justice system.
I'm delighted to intervene in the World Congress. I particularly appreciate that this is a World Congress on the topic of justice with children. That title sends a strong message of inclusiveness, of participation, of treating the child with honour, dignity and respect. In that spirit, I have just 3 very brief messages. The first is that we don't have access to justice on an equal basis in our society. Many groups are pushed to the margins, to the edges of our communities, and within those groups, the position of children is particularly problematic. Just think in my European context of the situation of the migrant who is a child, or the Roma who is a child. But second, we also have to look at the extent to which even within children in groups such as this, there's an inequality in terms of access to justice. The experience of boys and girls is always different. And typically, and we know this from our research, the experience of the girl is going to be worse than that of the boy. And it's not just about basic issues of access, of course, it's also in the ways they experience crime. A girl is likely to experience different kinds of crime to boys. And the third and final of my messages today is that whatever we do in improving justice with children, we have to do it by listening to children, not as a group, but individually. Every child is unique. The story of every child is different. We will only ensure a respectful engagement with the justice system by listening intently to each and every child who encounters it.
تحية عطرة من الجزائر لكل الحاضرين في هذا المنتدى العالمي المعني بالعدالة مع الأطفال. أولت بلاد الجزائر أهمية كبيرة للطفولة، فكانت السباقة إلى المصادقة على كل الاتفاقيات ذات صلة، ومنها الاتفاقية الدولية لحقوق الطفل، وفي تشريعاتها الوطنية كرست حماية واسعة للطفل، وتعززت إثر التعديل الدستوري الأخير لسنة 2020 بدستورة المصلحة العليا للطفل، فضلا على أنها قد تمنت مجهوداتها بتعديل قانون العقوبات بتجريم وتجديد العقاب على كل أعمال العنف المرتكبة ضد الأطفال. وكانت سنة 2015 سنة الطفل بامتياز بصدور قانون خاص بحماية الطفل أقر حماية اجتماعية وقضائية للطفل في خطر وإجراءات خاصة لجنوح الأطفال، واستحدثت من خلاله هيئة وطنية لحماية وترقية الطفولة تسهر على تنسيق كل الجهود في مجال الطفولة على المستوى الوطني والدولي، كما أنها تضمن التدخل السريع والآني حين المساس بحقوقه أينما كان. ومن أجل ذلك تم تنصيب خلية لتلقي الإخطارات عن انتهاكات حقوق الطفل عبر كل وسائل الاتصال المتاحة، لا سيما إطلاق رقم أخضر مجاني الذي استقطب اهتمام المواطنين، وهو نتاج عملنا المتواصل لتجنيد كل المجتمع لخدمة الطفولة، إيمانا منا أن حماية الطفولة مسؤولية الجميع، وأن المستقبل مرهون بما نقدمه اليوم لأطفالنا.
Comme vous le savez, la non-application des mesures non privatives de liberté reste un enjeu global au niveau des États. Malheureusement, le Burkina Faso n'échappe pas à ce phénomène car son système de justice accorde encore une place de choix à la peine privative de liberté comme réponse dominante à la commission des infractions. Toutefois, dans le cas de la justice pénale pour mineurs, le Burkina Faso a fait l'option de s'inscrire dans une approche de justice restauratrice afin de minimiser au maximum le recours à l'incarcération des enfants en conflit avec la loi. À cet effet, il a internalisé les normes internationales qui recommandent aux États une approche restauratrice en adoptant des lois spéciales pour mineurs, lesquelles prévoient des mesures non privatives de liberté. D'autre part, il vient d'entamer l'élaboration d'un décret d'application portant sur les mesures non privatives de liberté afin de donner aux magistrats tous les outils nécessaires pour leur permettre de recourir en faveur des enfants en conflit avec la loi.
Violence against children is a major threat to global development, and it affects millions of children all over the world. The consequences of violence include not only considerable harm to the individual child, but also hazard in high cost for families, communities, and society. We recognize that violence against children is not only a crime problem, but first a developmental issue that requires a holistic approach and comprehensive multi-stakeholder action. The justice system has a key role to play in preventing and responding to violence against children in close cooperation with other systems. Addressing the vulnerabilities of children in contact with the justice system and protecting them from all forms of violence is a key priority for Cape Verde and a requirement to empower children as agents of change and to encourage them to live free from violence. Throughout 32 years of implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Cape Verde created the necessary legal and policy framework, reinforcing the links between the justice system and child protection service, and set up a system for monitoring child protection indicator, including justice for children. This led to a dramatic improvement in the protection of children and teenagers against all forms of violence and abuse, with an emphasis on combating sexual abuse and exploitation. For the current legislature 2021-2026, through the National Plan for the Prevention and Combat of Sexual Violence Against Children and Teenagers 2022-2024, Cape Verde is strongly committed on creating the condition for a child-friendly justice. To do so, we commit to zero tolerance and maximum priority for crime against children, raising awareness, training, justice and policy, giving top priority to pending cases of sexual crimes against children, reinforcing online laws against digital crime, and working with local authorities, civil societies, the academia and the private sector, including the big players in the tourism industry, to end violence and sexual exploitation and abuse. Only together we can achieve this. Our children are counting on us.
In my work on justice issues in the past 3 decades, I have come across many instances in which children interact with the legal system in different contexts. They are sometimes victims of crime and abuse from the community, but also often by family members and others close to them, who should instead be providing them with care and protection. These abuses include criminal acts such as assaults, rape, incest, sexual harassment, and other violence, as well as deprivation of food, shelter, medical care, and other basic necessities by parents and families. Children also come into contact with the law as offenders or perpetrators of crime, often due to their lack of maturity, poverty, and influence from adults. They may also become involved with the justice system as witnesses to a crime or be called upon to support claims for their own maintenance and welfare. In all these cases, such children need special care and protection. While justice systems everywhere have special legal provisions applicable to children, they have generally fallen short of ensuring their full protection and welfare to the standards set out in both domestic law and global instruments such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Common shortcomings include limited access to legal institutions and remedies due to their long distances, lack of funds, unhelpful or biased officials, gender stereotyping, gender-based violence, and in some cases harassment by state agencies. We need to recommit ourselves to delivering on our promises to protect children and promote their welfare. We must adopt laws, practices, and policies that are child-friendly, non-discriminatory, and empowering of children. They should be backed up by effective enforcement mechanisms to make a difference to the rights and welfare of children in their day-to-day lives. To achieve this, we must invest adequate human and financial resources to this effort, to conduct training and sensitization programs for officials and communities on children's rights, as well as allow children to participate in developing solutions to justice problems. It is my sincere hope that this Congress will provide an opportunity to reflect on better ways to improve the rights and welfare of children in their interaction with the justice system.
OMCT is a global SOS torture network that believes that we can only achieve the eradication of torture if we support networks and local actors, and in particular, local civil society who act for change. OMCT, as the first anti-torture organization, has made the issue of children and torture a distinct and separate program priority for more than 20 years. I therefore greatly appreciate the focus that this World Congress gives to children deprived of liberty and the issue of torture of children in detention, which has also been the focus of my concern and of interest to me as a human rights defender and a lawyer for the past 40 years. I would just say that there are a lot of encouraging trends, but the issue of torture of children remains a frequent reality that we all need to address by working together, combining efforts from child rights and anti-torture work. This complementarity and combined effort can lead to an increased protection for children. We must make a clear call for all actors to integrate the issue of torture of children in their work, using, for instance, some of the best practices showcased in the OMCT's Global Guide on Best Practices to Protect Children from Torture. So I would end here and make a plea for all those networks who work on torture to make sure that they are also focusing on torture as a practice that is used systematically and is widespread for children in detention.
As the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, I work on a daily basis with the UN and other partners for the protection of children from abuses occurring in armed conflicts. Children in armed conflicts are amongst the most exposed to human rights violations. Access to justice for them is one such right which must be respected and protected. Promoting access to justice for all children requires efforts from all of us, the international community, UN partners, member states, as well as civil society organizations. Children should also be at the center of our joint efforts, and I am pleased to see children genuinely engaged in the Child Advisory Group summoned for the Congress. It is central to have them at the table of the discussion, together with academia and global organizations such as the World Bank, which express their readiness to engage all their capacities for the best interest of the child. This principle, the best interest of the child, is enshrined in the Convention on the Rights of the Child and guides my efforts and those of my office, including regarding advocacy for the reintegration of children with justice as one of its components. My office also makes sure to place the voices of children at the heart of its work, including by supporting initiatives such as the stakeholders-led Nairobi process, bringing together children formerly associated with armed forces and armed groups, talking to each other and to us. I am also pleased that my office's academic advisory group on child reintegration engages in the discussion on meaningful participation in peacebuilding and transitional justice processes. All these efforts are contributing to strengthening access to justice for conflict-affected children and ensuring that their rights are respected and their voices heard. Let me reiterate that the core function of the justice system should be to prevent child rights violations and ensure that boys and girls are provided with information about their rights in a way that they can understand it, so that they can become positively engaged in the society and in peace-building processes, that they can heal from trauma and that they can thrive. They deserve it.
My name is Maaike de Lange and I lead the justice work with the Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies. The Pathfinders is a group of countries, organizations and people working to achieve SDG 16. We work together to reduce inequality and exclusion, to prevent all forms of violence, and to provide equal access to justice for all. Justice with children and justice for children has always been a part of our work for justice for all. We partnered with a group of organizations who are working in this area, and in 2019 we launched a call to action on justice for children. It's the same group of organizations that are behind this World Congress on Justice with Children, and it is our pleasure to continue to partner with them to make this a reality. Young people around the world are leading and working for justice in their communities. They are taking initiatives, they are speaking up, they are organizing for more fairness in their schools, in their organizations, in their society. This is not only for their own benefit, but for society as a whole, and we value their perspectives and inputs into our work. It is therefore my great pleasure to present to you Agnes Cynthia Amoding, who will do an exciting announcement on behalf of the Pathfinders. She is a justice leader in her own right, and we're very happy to have her make this announcement.
My name is Amoding Agnes Cynthia, one of the Next Generation Fellows at UN Foundation. I come from Uganda. From my experience working with boys and girls, I know the value of ensuring the voices and participation of children in changing, crafting, and building systems and spaces that affect them now and in the future, especially justice. Justice is critical in addressing the crisis of today and tomorrow. And as a Next Generation Fellow, I, along with my fellow participants, articulated to leadership that it is not our job to agree with you, and laid out clear and actionable ways to face the many crises we see today, including addressing the justice gap. Leaders, including the Secretary General, have stated that they must better incorporate the expertise of young people. That's why I'm excited to announce a new initiative by the Pathfinders, the Young Justice Leaders, a group of young leaders in the field who will work together to continue to speak out, co-create items and plans to contribute and influence the 2023 SDG Summit. Please keep an eye for more information. Thank you so much.
Children should not be in prison. They belong in schools and in safe home environments. It has been demonstrated that exposure to the criminal justice system causes them harm, limiting their chances of becoming responsible adults. The majority of children in conflict with the law come from vulnerable backgrounds, especially those from ethnic and minority groups. Many suffer from social exclusion and discrimination. Support and effective cooperation between parents and public systems such as child welfare, social protection, education, health, law enforcement, and justice could prevent children from coming into conflict with the law. We have a comprehensive international system establishing obligations for states, including the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and numerous international standards and norms. General Comment 24 of the Committee on the Rights of the Child provides clear guidelines for states to establish juvenile justice systems in compliance with the Convention. That entails the use of alternative measures such as diversion and restorative justice. A child justice system must promote children's reintegration into society while treating them in a manner that reinforces their sense of dignity and worth. However, legalized violence against children as a sentence for a crime, such as capital punishment, life imprisonment, and corporal punishment, continue to exist. In some countries, this can even include flogging, stoning, and amputation. These types of punishment are clear violations of the rights of the child. Furthermore, according to international law, the deprivation of liberty of children should only be used as a measure of last resort and for the shortest appropriate period of time possible. This cannot be stressed enough. But across the world, turning these standards into reality is still an enormous challenge. The public perception that juvenile delinquency is increasing is particularly concerning. Such perceptions are frequently not grounded on evidence but based on media reports of a few serious cases. They influence political discourse and often lead to the adoption of legislation and measures that disregard or even weaken children's rights and their protection against violence. The global study on children deprived of liberty brings to light the dramatic situation children face when they reach the justice system. It also brings important recommendations on preventing the detention of children and on addressing its root causes in a systemic and holistic manner. These recommendations should be urgently implemented, and I trust this World Congress will help us in this direction.